But before we get started, so everyone knows who you are, what you've done, your background, I figure the first thing we can do is I'll just open it up, toss to them, tell us your name, and kind of in a few sentences tell us a little bit about us or your business.
Awesome. So Mike Healy. Basically, the coolest part is I have been a member of this church for around 23 years now, which is kind of crazy. Originally, yeah, thank you. That's enough. I might blow that right out of the water. I was actually in the bar business previously, had no business background, didn't know what I was going to do with my life, thought I was going to go to the military, ended up becoming a bouncer down at a High State campus. I was in charge of most of the bars down there on High Street for quite a few years and did that, and then I decided I was going to be an entrepreneur about 23 years ago, and it's been, entrepreneur is just short for you're unemployable, but you got to figure out how to get money to pay for stuff. If you want to know the real definition of an entrepreneur, but so it's been awesome.
That's great. Now, a lot of you guys, if you listen to the probably the original, what was called the Now Revolution, or it may have been called the Financial Revolution, a number of Mike's stories are in there, but one of the ones that a lot of people may recognize him for is the Corvette Story. So this is the gentleman who entered the competition, won a Corvette, and then ended up, you sold it. Stacy won the Corvette, and then he sold it, that week or something? Yeah, a little bit later. So a lot of people may recognize him from that story. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. You guys ready? You excited?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to start with the first question. What role has your relationship with God played in the amount of success that you've experienced as a business owner? Whoever wants to go first can go ahead and start. It's awesome.
I'm going to go next, Dan, because I'm going to toss it right back to you based on what I say, because it's going to be that good. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Okay, so I coming out of the bar business, and the good news for me was I didn't have any kind of religious background. I was as rough around the edges as you could be, and my wife actually had enough root in the word from her parents, just enough basically that got her to suggest we may go to a church somewhere, that kind of thing. And I went kicking and screaming and stuff like that, and I had been to some churches, and I didn't go to any place really that made a significant impact on me, because I'd heard about the God, I heard the religion, I heard the Jesus. I didn't know what a Holy Spirit was. I thought it was Casper the Friendly Ghost kind of spirit. I didn't know, right? Anybody else? Or is it just me? Okay, thank you, one honest person. And the thing is I'm being the way my brain works and being analytical and thinking things out, I wanted to see evidence. Right? I'm the guy, probably the doubting Thomas, that has to stick my finger in the guy. Not the guy, Jesus, but sorry, I didn't mean to be like, no, I'm kidding. Yeah, thank you. I'm just being honest here. But what happened was when Stacy came here, we were invited by somebody to the Faith Life Church, and this is almost a commercial for our church and for our pastors, is I saw evidence, okay? And one thing that I'd learned in business was never take financial advice from someone you don't want to be like financially. Anybody thought that one out yet? How many of you guys got friends that give you all kinds of great advice, but they're broke as Billy Bob up the street, right? Think about that one from a business perspective, okay? I remember going to the very first event that Pastor had when the church was very small, when he could do this, and I didn't know anything about respect and honoring, and I remember walking in, he had a decent house. I mean, it was huge to me, but it was a decent house, right? And I was like, hey, Gary, nice house. I like this. I like to see somebody practicing what they preach. I don't talk like that to him anymore, obviously. But it was really, really encouraging. But the other thing, too, is I was learning principles and watching the evidence play out. So it wasn't like I was trying to believe first in a way, as I was looking for evidence, which leads me to Dan Lane. So Dan Lane happens to be a farmer at our church, and he was probably just as skeptical as I was the first time you ever came to the church and hear some of this teaching about what God can do and how he can prosper you in the Word and all that. And what happened for me was when I started to plug around guys like this, it started to make more sense, because it wasn't going the world's way, because my goal wasn't necessarily just to be rich and famous, it was to have a great family. And I finally figured out that business was the vehicle to kind of make that happen, not the other way around. And so Dan's been a huge inspiration, whether you know it or not, and I've never told you, but it's been pretty amazing to watch what he does with he's going on. So introduce yourself, Dan.
Yeah. So You know,
Okay, so let's bounce off of that. We're going to keep going. So with our next question, which is going to talk about passion, and I think it bounces a little bit off of what Paul mentioned earlier, which is you may not, a lot of people have heard when it comes to success, if you watch people being interviewed when they're in their 50s and 60s, there's a common phrase that you'll hear them say, which is, I never thought, and then fill in the, I never thought I'd be doing this. I never pictured this here. I never thought that. It does happen where people at a young age know, nope, I know I'm going to be a doctor. As soon as I was born, I wanted to be a doctor. Went to school as a doctor, and I was a doctor for 40, 50 years, and I was a doctor. But that's not the typical situation. So because of that, what role? Let's talk about passion. How important is passion to what you do now? What role does being passionate, from a standpoint of being a business owner, an entrepreneur, what role does passion play in that? Very good, Mike.
It's kind of a tough one to kind of narrow that question down, to be honest. Okay, because there's a lot of times, sometimes you can be passionate about something, but then you get burned out, right? And the one thing that I think has helped me remain passionate, but most importantly, what he said was discipline, about being disciplined about something, that's usually the biggest hang up people have, is being disciplined to do something. Like you don't typically get overweight because you had a big pizza that one day. It was you basically tried to kill yourself day after day after day by one scoop at a time, right? One spoonful at a time. But I've learned, the one thing that I've learned, and I try to teach at some of the things I speak at, is I learned to become passionate about the process and not become as outcome focused as I was process focused. And let me explain this because it will help. Is if I know that if I get the process right, I know the outcome will happen, right? But a lot of times you don't see the outcome ahead of time or soon enough. Let me say it again, soon enough. Anybody impatient like me or not? Thank you. Okay. When you don't see it soon enough, like could you imagine Dan going out and planting all that corn or whatever you're planting, and an hour next day walking out there and screaming at the ground to produce something, right? Dan, these gentlemen right here, Gary and Paul, have figured out that what the process was to create the outcome, but then they became masters at being passionate and disciplined with the process, and the outcome happens. That's how I've just figured this out actually probably over the last 10 years, that it just seemed like, oh, I know what the process is. If I get excited about the process, reward myself for doing the process and the right things day in and day out, then the outcome happens, and it's always come to pass every single time.
Very good. That's good. Okay, I'm going to kind of transition. I'm going to bounce off of something that Paul and Mike, basically everyone's kind of touched on, and ask you guys a different question. So let's talk about despising not small beginnings, and that kind of fits with passion, because your story about the phone booth, you would have never imagined Chick-fil-A. And you even said it, I just said it earlier, and you said it here. I never thought I'd be in Chick-fil-A. And a lot of times you find that, and it's not the function, it's the gifting. So a lot of times we have giftings God's given us, and we're trying to figure out the function to use the gifting. The gifting's there. We know this may be what I enjoy doing, and we're trying to solve in what function does that play out, and that's the discovery process a lot of times. But let's talk about despising not small beginnings, because I'm sure all of you through this process have had times, especially in this day and age, where people out there may be wanting to start a business, and you hear this overnight success. This went viral. This person posted this video, and all of a sudden their business overnight's very successful. And the misplaced dedication to learning the process, staying diligent. So let's kind of talk about that for a second. So what role do you think not devaluing, despising small beginnings plays?
Well, I think to play on what you said, I'm so glad you brought it up because it triggered a thought I had. Was one of the hardest things I had to do when I first started, being a business guy, was you're really enthusiastic, coming out of the gates like Seabiscuit, getting ready to run a meet. And then what happens is because maybe you don't have you know who you are and your identity with Christ and things like that, is you become jealous of other people's success, right? Because I remember at one time when this wasn't the church here, was the small warehouse, and pastor used to teach about, that type of thing, like, not being jealous and being stuff like that. And I remember I used to drive around this area in New Albany. There's a lot of really big houses, like multi-million-dollar homes that you're like, man, that guy's got it going on, and oh man, I can't wait to get into that one. I'm gonna be driving that one, that kind of thing, right? And we all been there. But then when business happens, and you get your butt handed to you a few times, you start going, that guy probably sold drugs to get that house. Right? There's got to be a shortcut. He probably killed he inherited that money, right? Heck with that guy. And I remember the neighborhood I would drive through to being inspired by, I was driving through the neighborhood and being upset about it. And I remember coming into church, and I sat in there like in the back, and I'm like, this is stupid. I don't even know why he's talking about prosperity. The guy's mad, right? And it was like God shined a flashlight at me. He said, I think Pastor Gary said this, is if you can't rejoice in someone else's prosperity and success, you'll never have any of your own. And he just moved on, and I don't even know if that was his topic. But to me, that was like a wake-up call. It was like a diamond that hit me in the head. And I learned a lot from that, because then I noted because you can't receive from somebody that you're angry at or repelling, right? Like when you have a bunch of people that are enthusiastic about sharing their knowledge, but if you walk up and you're like, Dan, I bet you stole that tractor. Yeah, and that kind of thing. And you're thinking, oh, I loved your speech, but that's what they're thinking. But you have to get back and check yourself and get rooted in the Word as to what the promises are for you, regardless. Because here's the thing too, and I'm not sorry to monopolize this one for a second, is that you can get there too fast, too. Like because just because your income goes up does not mean your financial IQ goes up. Do you have more or less problems the bigger business that you have? Quick show of hands, more. Right? And if you think about it, some people want success so bad, so fast, that they don't realize that God can't give the keys to a Ferrari if he's 5. What will happen with him? Sweet car, great opportunity, kid wants to drive it, but there's death involved, right? And it's the same type of thing as an entrepreneur. If you just got to just take a deep breath sometimes and realize that I'm going to be happy for that guy. I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to glean thing. And every adversity, if you turn it around correctly and get it as an opportunity to learn from, it'll make the journey much easier. Because there's been investments that I've jumped on and been enthusiastic and shouldn't have done that I'm just grateful they didn't have extra digits in them. They had commas and lots of digits, but that money, I would have had more fun just burning it in my yard and roasting marshmallows with it than some of the stuff I've done. So you can learn these ways, but am I telling the truth here?
Yeah.
Can I say something real quick?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Hey, just popped into my head, but you got to remember, too, about the significance of having a godly woman as part of your, because remember, you hook up with Jezebel, she gets half if things go south, right? So you have to remember that it's important to be not equally yoked. You guys think that's funny, but that's the truth. How many of you guys seen that where they didn't take the time, they got all rowdy, they jumped the gun, that kind of thing, and they didn't honor what's the wisdom that a woman can bring to you, a godly woman can bring to you. So I know there's some younger guys in here and stuff like that. I'm just trying to save you some headaches, right? That's the kind of thing, but just popped in my head. Jason's like, I can't believe you said that.
No, you're good. You're good. Paul, did you want to add something?
I was just going to say, they don't even get half. They actually tear the kingdom down. I mean, Jezebel tore the kingdom down, right? So it just destroys you.
Tell us how, there may be some people who have launched out. They're an entrepreneur. They're starting. Tell us about how you guys have handled through the years with your experience, the feeling, the desire to quit, to say, you know what, I just can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. Throughout the course of your journey, how have you handled any desires, or even if it's been, if you've had situations where you may have had close friends, maybe with good intentions, but close friends maybe offer advice that you really felt like, yeah, I don't know if I should take that. I don't know if I shouldn't take that. Because there may be some people out there who are in the midst of of getting this started in this small beginning, and they're just feeling that, I don't know if I can do that. Maybe I should quit. Maybe I should just not do this. So talk about how you've handled that.
I think it's in anything in life, you're going to be up against adversity on a regular basis. One of the things that I was inspired, that pastor had taught many all the time, I've heard this multiple times, but was he said that you have to learn how to embrace the conflict. That again, it's kind of part of the process. Now, I'm not saying that you're not going to have times where you're going to not wig, and I've flipped over tables, right, out of frustration. I've put my hand through walls and doors. Am I the only one that does I don't do it anymore. Thank you, a couple of them. Jared, you work here at the church too, don't you? I pointed you out. I'm sorry, did I say Jared's name out loud? But you know what I mean? These things happen, right? You get frustrated. You get people that would probably tell you that's a dumb idea to spend that kind of money to start a franchise. What kind of business is farming? I mean, it rains a lot and things can flood, right? And you will hear all those naysayers. Who was it? I forget. I thought in my head, I can't remember. Which disciple said, it was Paul, wasn't it, that said, don't get behind me, Satan? Or Jesus said, get behind me, Satan? Peter, thank you. Peter's one of my favorite guys in the Bible because he seems like the most rough around the edges that I can actually relate to. I was actually reading about him this morning. And I think that's one of the things is a lot of times you probably deep down in your heart have been called, we've all been called for success, right? That's just a kingdom gift, right? But we're stuck in the earth curse system, as Pastor would teach you. And you have to learn how to navigate through that against a lot of the naysayers and the Peters that will say that with good intentions. There's family members that have told me, literally have invited me over to their houses for practical interventions of not being a business owner, right? And doing what I do for a living, that kind of thing. And I'm like, but you're broke. I didn't say that out loud, but I'm like, you're in debt. You know what I'm saying? But that's what. So to me, it was I had to eventually learn to it because I think it was just recently Elon Musk said that on a big podcast or whatever, there was like millions of people listening to it. Said, hey, the guy interviewing him said, hey, what advice would you give entrepreneurs? He said, if you really need advice and inspiration, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur. I was like, oh, mic drop. That was kind of thing. But to me, that was kind of the thing is I had to learn some of these things and embrace the conflict and kind of keep going with it. And again, it's all rooted in how do you overcome the conflict is you have to know who you are in Christ and have the root there that, hey, God's got me in this direction. Because 5 years from now, or if you look back on where you were 5 years ago, you'll be shocked at the little course correction God did on your life that you thought at the time were terrible. But if you didn't learn those things or go through that adversity, you couldn't do it. You can't run the football 100 yards a game if you're not doing wind sprints early when no one's looking, right?
Okay. Our next question is share with us some basic guiding principles that have made the difference for you and your success as an entrepreneur or a business owner. So some very practical principles that you do or that you've done over the years that you feel has helped you become successful.
I think the biggest thing was to learn systems, okay? And when I mean systems, is I heard a guy, real famous, I forget what you would call him, but he wrote some books and everything like that. He said something. He said, systems are the leverage by which you turn ordinary people into extraordinary performers. Great businesses do not look for ordinary people. Great businesses leverage them with extraordinary systems, right? So it was something that just jumped into my head. And he used the McDonald's reference as an example. But to me, I'm glad you're up here with the Chick-fil-A thing because I think that when I started to learn systems, and I know you have the story, the testimony in your book, or not your book, but Pastor's book. I think it's Fixing the Money thing. Or wait, no, it's Money Mysteries from the Master, where he was talking about how you found something in the trash of learning new ways to do things. So in an essence, I learned to embrace new things. Like to me, it just cracks me up when I have business or conversations with people that want to be business owners. I'm 53 years old, and there's people like my age or even a little bit younger or maybe even older that are like, oh, well, I'm not really good on a computer or anything. I'm like, computers have been around for like 35 years now. 50, maybe 100. How are you not getting at this yet? Right? Wake up. I don't want to do that. Computers confuse me. Oh, you're going to stay broke if you don't learn new things. Like, thank you. You're going to laugh at this, but I actually go through your drive-through because my son plays football over in that area. I like the food, but I am fascinated at how fast they put people through the drive-through. Because I drove up there, my son got me there to go there one time. I drive up, I'm like, dude, there's like 40 cars in that parking lot. He goes, watch this. And I go, and he's 18 like this, and I go, okay. And it was the first time I experienced what you guys had transitioned into with the thing that's going on. And I was like, holy smokes, that was like 4 minutes. And I'm like, do you care if we go through again? And he's like, no, we gotta.
Please do.
He's like, no, we have to go home. I'm like, and he's like, you're serious? I go, did you see that? Because to me, it was like, oh my gosh, this is somebody or a group of people that took the time to figure out, hey, if I can get from point A to point B, it takes me 5 minutes, how could I do it in 4? Right? And all you do is ask questions, right? How can I do things more efficiently? And that was really what it came down to, because so many people do things the same way over and over and over again and think they're going to get different results, when you have to learn how to be creative and embrace new things.
Very, very good.
Sorry. I get passionate about that stuff.
Very, very good. And I'll second that. Chick-fil-A, one thing they own it. I'll say that. Like, they just own it. It's like, you know what, if we're going to have it, let's just create. We'll go to the East End to your and there'll be 2 cars and there'll be a line, but it's like you could go to another place and maybe there's 1 car in front of you. You might as well put it in park. But at Chick-fil-A, you're just right through. So they that process, they own that. All right, Mr. Paul.
You want to just drop your mic?
No. Well, so in full disclosure, we don't always get it right, but we do have 100. At this point, we got 124 team members in our organization, and it's a lot of moving pieces. But
all right, so our next question is, out of curiosity, before I ask this, show of hands, how many of you in here right now you currently own your own business, or you're an entrepreneur? Raise your hand. Just a quick show of hands. Wow, well over half. That's awesome. All right, so the other people, we're assuming you're aspiring to that, or that's something you'd like to do. So here's the next question: is for those aspiring to own their own business, or they're just starting out, so they're either aspiring to own it or they're just starting out. Basically, in those early days, what kind of advice would you give them? What kind of advice would you give them?
Sorry, I actually was going to say that Paul said it almost a second ago, is to be a scribe, to learn from the people that you want to be like. Like I said that at the very beginning, don't take financial advice from somebody you won't be like financially, and seek out mentors. That would be probably one of the biggest tips I could give you. And the thing is right now, in today's society, the way technology works, there is absolutely there's no excuse for not having what you need, the wisdom, the knowledge, the ideas, with all the podcasts, the YouTubes, the BitChutes, the videos, everything that you can look up and learn from different people. And you don't have to just stay on one person at one time. You can learn from one and then move to the next one and kind of glean from different people. But that's kind of what I did. Is I remember the first time I said I was going to do business for myself. It was in a kind of a direct selling company, and I remember I went to every meeting. I went to every meeting, and I listened to the speakers, and it was the same thing over and over again. And then I would watch VHS tapes, and because I knew eventually I had to be on stage, because typically the guys on stage made more money than the guys sitting in the audience, is what they would always say. And I was like, okay, I got to learn how to speak. So I'd watch this videotape over and over and over again. And that was kind of how I got started. It was exactly what Paul was saying, is be a student first, and then you can kind of move on to the master kind of scenarios.
All right, so we're going to kind of wrap it up here. I'm going to ask him one last question to kind of go around. Throughout your journey, what is one thing that you have enjoyed the most about what you've done, what you've accomplished, what you're doing now? One thing that you get the most joy from, or that you look back and you're like, I'm really proud of this, or I'm really joyful about this, about the journey?
That's actually kind of easy for me. I achieved the goal. Most of my goal was to raise a good family, and enjoy being around my wife all the time. Like, for some reason, my wife and I, we were with each other all day, pretty much every day, and we still like each other. It's like a miracle in itself, right? But because of the choices that I made to do the hard things when everybody else said, oh, do this easy thing and be an entrepreneur, I didn't miss any of my kids' games throughout their entire career lives. I was able to have conversations with them that they couldn't, most people would never be able to have with their family. I was able to raise my kids. I mean, I literally dictated my future. My youngest is 18. My daughter is, I think, 23. And my middle son is about to turn 21. And it's just, to me, the reward is there. Like, I actually, my biggest goal has been achieved, but it wasn't like that at the beginning. It was like a dream, but it was hard throughout the process, right? It was hard through the process and so on. And now I have, even bigger dreams, but I don't have as many people to spend the money on, which is kind of cool. Like, my income doesn't have to go up and I'm rich, because these kids eat me out of the house and home, that kind of thing. They're two big, stocky football players. They'll eat, and I'm kind of a hog myself. But so it's to me, it's been just fulfilling to call my own shots, watch my family grow up, and that kind of thing. And I've had people that were probably 10 times more successful than me, financially speaking, that privately had come up to me and said, I wish I would have done what you did with your family, because they lost everything. Like, they lost their wives, they lost their kids, they did everything because they pursued the wrong goal, which was the money, which seemed like that was what it was. But you can't leave the good people on the way, behind you on the ship there. You got to take them with you.
Very good. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Before we actually close it out, I figured I'd just open up for any last comments. If you guys wanted to share any last thoughts or final feedbacks or final comments or anything like that.
I'll just say something real quick is congratulations to all of you guys for attending. Okay, a lot of people don't think about that, but you actually took a humongous step to do something out of your comfort zone, something different. You didn't probably know what the men's conference was going to be like and that kind of thing. And that's a huge thing. It's you just sometimes don't know what little things you're going to learn when you're going to learn them. And so, round of applause for all you guys for being here.